Hey everybody, welcome to this video. It's the first in a kind of short series where I'm basically taking the wording of the mark scheme for the new GCSE English language writing section of the exam, and I'm breaking down what exactly you need to demonstrate in your writing to achieve the highest marks. And all I'm going to do is show you the dictionary definition of each of the words from the mark scheme that is proving quite confusing for students and teachers around the country, and I'm going to break down how do you demonstrate it in a piece of writing. So on the AQA English Language Paper 1, Question 5, which is the descriptive or narrative writing, one of the things you need to hit the highest marks is to be convincing. Now this is quite interesting because you would think this would be a word that would show up in paper 2 where you're writing to persuade or argue, but actually it's in paper 1 where you're writing a descriptive piece or a narrative piece. In other words, a sort of a description of something or a story, part of a story. So how do you be convincing? Well, convincing has two different descriptions. Number one, persuading or assuring. Number two, appearing worthy of belief or plausible. And really the definition we're going to stick with and focus on is definition number 2 for convincing. If you're writing a descriptive piece, so you're describing, let's say, a shopping centre at night, to be convincing, to be plausible and worthy of belief, you need to describe in such a way that when the reader is reading it, they can picture exactly what you're describing. That's how you be convincing in descriptive writing. And I've got previous videos on using the senses so that you don't just write about what you can see, but you write about what you can hear and smell and taste and feel, and you be convincing. You paint a picture with words that when the examiner reads it, they are convinced, they can see in their mind what you're trying to describe. Now, what about if it's a narrative? And I've done a lot of work with students recently about narrative, about story writing, because one of the um, pieces of controlled assessment is about this sort of narrative writing. So in the old spec, the 2016 spec, one of the things a lot of people do is a narrative writing. Now, there is a tendency when it comes to writing a story to write something that is very over the top. Okay, so if I ask a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old to write a story, it'll tend to be a bit like an action film. There'll be explosions, there'll be stabbings and blood, and it'll just be sort of very over the top. The highest grades that you can achieve with narrative writing are about writing with subtlety. And in that sense, what we have here is appearing worthy of belief or being plausible. In other words, writing a story that isn't over the top and ridiculously full of kind of monsters and blood and guts and all of this sort of thing, but writing something which is actually you bring it back from that. You don't make it so over the top. Okay, so if you're writing a narrative piece, and for example, you might have a picture of a stormy beach, and it'll say write a story based on this picture. That's just an example. If you have a question like that, the thing not to do is to write this kind of big adventurous story about someone being swept out to sea, and then they were drowning, and they were rescued, and all of this kind of thing. It's just not so plausible. What you need to try to do is keep your narratives a little bit more realistic, a little bit more, as we say here, convincing, where something happens but it's not over the top. And if you have a look at my videos and also in the ebook at mrbrough.com, £3.99 at mrbrough.com and amazon.co.uk, I've got examples of story writing that are convincing. And it really is about not a great deal happens. Some things happen as it's completely boring, but it's not sort of this over the top, unrealistic style of writing. So that's where we go with the word convincing. At first, it seems challenging that it applies to paper 1, but we can understand with its second definition here how it makes sense when we're writing in a descriptive way or writing a narrative piece.